inspiring. Our last speaker, ladies and gentlemen, before our coffee break is Martin Exel. He's working on a global initiative on ocean sustainability called SeaBOS. And Martin has been a background in fishery management, working with the Australian government. And he's also been the general manager on environment and policy in Austral fisheries. And he has coordinated the coalition of legal toothfish operators fighting IUU in the Southern Ocean. Martin, the floor is yours.
23 years ago, I was working for a company that was in a major crisis. We had illegal fishing occurring in the Southern Ocean in the Australian Economic Zone that was going to decimate the stocks. It was destroying the environment. And from a fish business perspective, it was going to eliminate not just our profits, but our access right value and everything. One thing that the fish business is great at is dealing with crises. We started talking to anybody we could. We started collaborating with science, government, conservation groups, international agencies, national agencies, and we worked in a collaboration to eliminate this illegal fishing. Along the way, we drove governments nuts. One day, a compliance officer came to me and he said, "You're a cowboy. Stop this. Leave it to government. We'll fix this eventually." No hope. As an industry, we knew they weren't going to be able to keep up. But the thought triggered Cowboy and Indian and a wanted campaign. And so we created this group of industry across producers, post-harvest, retail, food outlet, called COLTO, the Coalition of Legal Toothfish Operators. We put up wanted posters in every port where crew came from, where these boats unloaded. We took information that was provided and we used that to provide to governments to help eliminate illegal fishing of toothfish. That led to collaboration. It led to a group where in 2015, up north of here in Awesome, we met with industry, science, policy, and dealt with issues as broad as dealing with whale depredation, i.e. whales eating fish off long lines, and climate change, collecting data on Antarctic operations. And what the hell's that got to do with SeaBOS? COLTO is still going, but SeaBOS as an initiative was something born out of vision. As an industry, we did really well dealing with crisis, but SeaBOS needed visionaries. And the prime instigator was Her Royal Highness, Crown Princess Victoria from Sweden, who she's one of the 18 alumni of the SDGs appointed by the previous UN Secretary General. And she drove, and continues to this day to drive, this concept of industry working with science, working with policy groups to achieve stewardship, corporate biosphere stewardship it's now called, of our oceans. She was joined by Carl Folke, Henrik Osterblom, Johan Rockström. They're all household names in science world globally, probably here too. But they couldn't do it alone. Currently, we have 10 visionaries, leaders, CEOs and or presidents of 10 of the largest seafood businesses in our industry. It's not all of them. There's a lot of very big businesses out here too. And of course, they, in turn, were preceded by some of the founders, some of the true visionaries who were working 4, 5, 6 years ago with these scientists before this collaboration and concept even came into being. And then there's this huge sort of group underneath, the science, the executives, those that are doing a lot of the doing. That real true operational excellence from the industry combined with the science excellence that can bring collaborations from Stockholm to Birmingham to Stanford, and there's plenty of people. The concept, the outline, the Keystone Actors, those true founders in the seafood business came out of science, with Keystone Actors being likened to a keystone species. And what happened there was a research program, this was in the US many years ago, where they removed starfish from a particular bay and then watched while the mussels took over everything else. And they worked out, if you take that starfish away, that's a keystone species, everything else collapses. And from that, the scientists came up with the idea of Keystone Actors. Get companies where they're connected, they're working with others, they're multinational, they have a major impact on our seafood business. What sort of impact? There's a lot of numbers there, but essentially they represent around 10% of the entire global trade in seafood. Somewhere around 30 billion US a year in terms of turnover. Unfortunately, that's not profit, but that's all right. 600 subsidiaries, 100,000 people. A huge effort. And they've come up with a joint mission to transform fisheries so that wild catch and aquaculture fisheries can be sustainable, so that our oceans can be healthy. It's easy to say, it's really hard to do. And at their core, they're wild catch fishermen, they're aquaculturists, feed companies, and they all want healthy oceans. And that, interesting enough, goes also for the science, the philanthropic trusts that are helping fund it, and of course all of the industry within it. And I reckon everyone in this room. So how do we make this work? We've got 10 companies sitting around a table, most of them competitors. We've got that dreaded antitrust where nobody can talk to anybody else about anything that is going to cross that line. And the concept is, and I've stolen this a bit from a publication, but the first thing was to build trust. So those early founders, the early industry members who were part of the SeaBOS machine, you had to build trust not just between industry and science, but amongst those industry players themselves. Once they trust each other, then you can have what I call, well, in fact, what I call it is conflict. What you have is you have that ability to look over the table and say, hey, Martin, that's not true. I know that. I'm in the industry. You're talking, I won't use an Australian term, but not the truth. Once you get through those constructive differences, and you can only have them with trust, then and only then can you really build collaboration. And that has to be pre-competitive. Once you collaborate, then you can start to hold each other accountable. And it all seems really complex. But one of the messages out of that is that challenge of everyone wants a result straight away. But you've got to go through these processes first. So in Phuket, it was our most recent meeting. This was October last year. The group got together, 9 of the 10 CEOs, science team, a couple of lawyers, and sat down and discussed and come up with strategies for where to in the future. As SeaBOS, we're not going to go out and do individual things ourselves. We need to collaborate with others. We need to work with others. So the group agreed to work with the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, collecting abandoned, lost, discarded fishing gear. Well, that works for wild catch, but also developing new standards of best practice for aquaculture. We work with the high-level panel on a sustainable ocean economy. We actually did an op-ed in the Financial Times supporting Port State Measures Agreement. Why? Because that helps eliminate IUU. We work with the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability to try and create an overarching global set of standards so that instead of all of us as companies having to produce a different traceability, another certification scheme, another set of documents for everyone, there's one set of standards which is global. And then you choose the platforms you want to use underneath that. I think linking with and leveraging is something we do extremely well in the seafood business. If you're in the business, you know it's actually about people. We love catching fish. We love feeding people. We love looking after the planet, but it's about people. We are good at linking, leveraging. What we've done is created 6 task forces, and that's very governmental language, right? And in the introduction, it was mentioned I came from government, and yes, it took me years to get government out of me, right? It's still there. But these 6 task forces are not going to be there forever. These are time-bound task forces. They have specific goals and aims. All of them are based in sustainability. The whole idea of these 6 task forces is to actually drive and create some innovation and some opportunities for change. The Climate Resilience Task Force is the one we added in Phuket. That was still being defined in terms of exactly what does all this mean. We do know eat more seafood is great for the planet. We do know reduced carbon footprint is going to be essential for the planet. And we do know that climate is impacting on our seafood. We're working on that now with the science teams, and we'll have some much clearer direction on where that's going to head in the future. But the key element of all of this is we do know transformation's essential. And it's hard. It's really hard. And the key to transformation, other than never, ever, ever giving up, is belief and understanding and vision about where is it we want to get to, where are we now, and how are we going to get there. As an industry, we've got the potential, we've got the capability, we've got the skills, we've actually got the knowledge to deal with all of these problems. But from a transformational perspective, that's really tough. From a corporation perspective, the 10 seafood businesses here, that is really tough because you're not just dealing with one little company somewhere, you're talking about hundreds of subsidiary companies all around the globe. Before you make a decision to shift and turn right or turn left, you've got to work out what the implications of that are, not just commercially, but for the future of your planet. So it's not easy, but by working with a sound scientific basis, by working with scientists, policy groups, and others, pretty major stuff can be achieved. This is a somewhat poor iceberg looking at the future, because realistically, that's what everyone wants to know about. Where are we heading? But before you get to the future, it needs to look at that, what's happening under those waves. The key element with the SeaBOS machine is it's a scientifically based, sustainability-based platform. It's all about building trust, collaboration, pre-competitive collaboration, and accountability, actually directing where it is we want to go. What are we expecting? What should you look for in the next couple of years out of SeaBOS? You'll see some really very direct action on IUU and forced labour. We've had about 3 years of research programs now looking at different parts of the globe and trying to analyse where the high risk areas are, trying to assess who it is that we can work with, establishing those linkages so that we can, for once, really truly make a huge difference. Antibiotics, flavour of the month, depending on which country you're in, it's a problem. Coronavirus helps actually, even though antibiotics have zero impact on a virus, people don't always get that link, right? It is a problem. We know it's a problem. We know that there are some solutions. We know that there are people developing amazing techniques or innovative techniques to deal with this very problem. And it's not salmon. Salmon has an issue. Salmon is dealing with it. Norway salmon is awesome. Prawns, Vietnam, whoa, challenging. You're dealing with individual farmers. So dealing with an antibiotic issue is not simple. Reducing plastics in our ocean is something every one of us would agree with. So pulling fishing gear out that's already been in there, that's a no-brainer. How else can we deal with plastics in our ocean? How can we prevent them getting in there in the first place? At what point do we actually identify how to deal with microplastics getting through into everything? We've been looking at various programs around the globe to assess from a scientific perspective, where's the key points that we can make where we can add the biggest value to reducing plastics in the ocean. Supply chain traceability, it's really easy to say. There are some amazing platforms, but getting full supply chain traceability is going to be critical. It's not just the producers that have to get that supply chain traceability in there. It's the retailers. We need pull from the consumers. We need it within our businesses. That means IT innovation. That means cost. But all of it actually ends up shredding cost from a business perspective. You suddenly have control over your stock, your inventory. You have to do a recall. You know where your product is exactly. You want to do QA, not a problem. Somebody asks you where your stuff came from. You can tell them. If it's a high-value species, provenance and branding. What's wrong with traceability? Why then aren't we all doing it? There's some element there we just got to come through. So we've got a whole lot of science around the different options on traceability, but also that policy, as I mentioned at the start, of the overarching key elements that we need to look for in any traceability platform. Transparency, absolutely. That's really tough. We've improved massively already as 10 major companies. How can we actually keep building on that? That's going to be key, and establishing our key performance indicators so that everyone can look and say, yep, they're doing what they said they're going to do. And then climate resilience. That's an inevitable, that's an essential requirement for everything all of us do in the seafood business. So you've got to work on that sort of underlying part of the iceberg to achieve the outputs. But what I would like to do in terms of the underlying is recognise the founders, particularly the first 10 CEOs, or actually there were 8 at that stage, that signed up to the dialogue and signed up to this statement, or this part of the statement, which I believe absolutely reinforces why are we doing what we're doing as SeaBOS. It's because we cannot thrive as an industry on an unsustainable planet. But the planet can't thrive without a sustainable seafood business. And that's why we're all here. And that's why we as industry and the science need to work together for the future. Thank you very much.